Gun smoke hung low in the bank, turning the noon light into smoky shafts that sliced through dust and splinters. 4 men lay sprawled across the floor, darkening the boards beneath them. Ethan Cole stood amid the wreckage, his Colt still warm in his hand, and the smell of gunpowder clinging to his clothes. He hadn't set out that morning to be anybody's savior, only to resupply and move on. But when the Blackwater gang had burst in, something in him answered the call. The soldier who'd stood his ground at Gettysburg rose up in him again. 2 of the gang were dead by his hand. Their leader, Jedediah Pike, fled with the rest. Before Pike vanished, Cole saw recognition in the man's eyes, an old familiarity from bloodier fields. Sheriff Frank Hollister arrived seconds later, revolver drawn, and his shock softened into a dawning memory. "Gettysburg," he muttered. "You were with the 20th Maine." Cole didn't correct him. The war sat inside him like a wound that wouldn't scar over. The doors opened once more and 2 deputies dragged in a bound woman. Her long black hair half hid a face that radiated defiance. She'd been locked in the vault. Townsfolk assumed Pike planned to ransom her. When Sheriff Hollister noticed the tattoo on her forearm, his expression went hard. "Sherika," he said, "a curse disguised as a name." The judge in the crowd, Whitebeard and all, called for a public solution. "Hang her. Let the town send a message." Cole listened to the talk of justice and property with a cold, small fury building in his chest. He stepped forward and put a hand on the woman's ropes. "She's not Raider's property," he said. "That mark means she's a chief's daughter. Pike's not after money." The judge laughed, the sort of laugh that precedes cruelty, and announced the town's reward for Cole's recent action. The Apache woman, handed over as if she were a thing. Her head snapped up then, eyes flashing hate and fear. Cole felt something old and sharpened inside him. The memory of leaving his brother on a battlefield. And he moved faster than the crowd could react. He cut her bonds and, in rough Apache, introduced himself. Ethan Cole were leaving. No one in Redemption dared stop a man who'd just killed 2 outlaws, so Cole led her outside and past the sheriff's warnings. They mounted and rode out of town under a hard sun, taking a first step neither had chosen but both were now bound to. The desert was a vast, merciless thing. For 3 days they traveled mostly in silence. Cole up front, his horse steady and strong, the woman behind him watching the horizon with guarded eyes. When she finally spoke on the second night, she gave her name Nali. She rode tense and tight with distrust, and when they camped beneath Red Rock, she refused his offer to relax. Cole did what he could. He made a small fire, shared a strip of jerky, and bluntly told her she needed to learn how to use a gun. She answered that she knew how to kill. Cole corrected her gently. "Not all killing is the same out here." He showed her how to hold a revolver, how to breathe when you squeeze the trigger. When the tin can at his 20 paces shattered under her shot, a ghost of a smile crossed her face. Their quiet was broken by the sound of horses the next day. A cavalry patrol came into view, blue coats that glinted like pins in the light. Cole recognized the officer leading them, Lieutenant Wilson from the 7th Cavalry. The world of old comrades and enemies closed in around him. Wilson's men eyed Nally with suspicion, fraternizing with the enemy. Wilson said flatly, and mentioned General Crook's orders to round up the Cherokee. Cole didn't back down. He told them she was under his protection. Wilson laughed at him and rode off, with a warning that stuck in Cole's teeth. If he was seen again with an Apache, the lieutenant wouldn't be so generous. Cole and Nally kept moving. They needed supplies and found a trading post clinging to the edge of nowhere, dusty, crooked. and populated by people who smelled of tobacco and cheap whiskey. The proprietor leered as Nali passed, and 3 men at a corner table watched like predators. When Cole asked for ammunition, one of those men moved first, drawn and dead before he hit the floor. A melee broke out. Nali showed a quickness Cole hadn't fully expected, a kicking sweep that disarmed the proprietor, a throwing knife that folded a bounty hunter in a heap. When they learned Pike had put 5,000 on Nali's head and more for whoever brought her back, their path was clear. Either stay and be hunted or keep running. They took shelter in a ramshackle miner's shack when a storm blew up from nowhere. A wall of dust and rain that turned the desert sky into a monstrous thing. The shack was split and fragile, but it offered cover for a time. Bullets punched through wood like angry insects. Cole and Nali crawled to opposite sides, and when the roof began to sag with the assault, Cole saw the danger first. He lunged, shoulder first, and slammed Nali toward the door as the ceiling folded in. Pain lanced through his side. They burst into the storm and straight into Pike's line. Cole moved without thinking, placing himself in the path of a bullet meant for her. He felt the blow, and then nothing as darkness pulled him away. When consciousness came back, it was slow and strange. He tasted sage and cedar smoke and heard a chant like water on stone. He opened his eyes and found himself lying on furs in a cave, bandages wrapped around a chest that felt foreign and heavy. Nali sat nearby, grinding herbs with an old mortar. She looked like someone reclaimed by her world, braids, beads, feathers. The lines of her face settling into something softer and fiercer all at once. "You should be dead," she said without surprise. "The bullet went through you. A white medicine man would have let you die." They had not been discovered by chance. Nali's people had found him and carried him here. She explained how they had fled at night, moved by travois, hiding during the day. Her knowledge had saved him more than once, with healing herbs, with routes through the mountains, with ways to move the wounded. Cole listened and, for the first time in a long while, stopped being only a man haunted by memory. He began to learn. The cave where he healed was carved deep into the mountain, its walls painted with handprints and animal figures. Stories in pigment and stone. A circle of Apache warriors watched him rise, their faces unreadable, until the old chief stepped forward. Cole recognized the name that had already whispered across frontier camps: Goithle. The chief's translation through Nali was blunt. Cole was the first white man to live long enough to see these caves. He might be killed now. Intentions meant nothing here. Actions were everything. Cole answered with action. He accepted the chief's challenge, a trial of endurance across the desert. No weapons, no water, set to test body and heart. The course chewed at him. Heat, stone, precarious ledges, and a rope bridge above a yawning chasm. At one narrow point his legs buckled and his vision blurred. He heard his brother's voice in his head like a command. One more step. When he staggered back to the cave entrance, blood soaking his bandages, the warriors stood silent. He had finished. Chief Goithle gave him a single word. A new name endures. It was recognition, nothing more, and everything. Over the following weeks, Cole and the Apache forged a new kind of alliance. He taught them pieces of soldiering, how cavalry scouts worked, how formations broke, how to exploit the limits of Springfield rifles. He showed them simple signals, bugle calls and their meanings, and how to frustrate a well-drilled unit. In return, the warriors taught him to be quiet in the landscape, where water hid beneath rocks, how to set traps and move without sound, how to use the desert as both shield and weapon. Nali and Cole moved as a pair now, their instincts tuned to one another. The line between rescuer and rescued had blurred into something mutual and steady. Word reached them that Wilson had not given up and had been nudged into joining with Pike, who'd convinced the lieutenant that the caves held gold and weapons for a rising. The lie was dangerous. The army began to close. "How many can your father gather?" Cole asked. 30, 40. Nellie said. "Not enough," Cole answered. "Then we will fight like there are 400, he said. Plans formed from necessity. Ambushes, misdirection, and the small deceptions that turn an enemy's strength into a weakness. When the cavalry came, it was at dawn. Wilson led his company carefully, Pike riding with him like a shadow. Cole and the warriors gave them an Apache welcome, sudden, precise strikes that pulled the soldiers into a narrowing canyon, rock slides that left men trapped, snipers picking officers off from concealed perches. Cole had insisted they aim for leadership. Chaos follows leaderless ranks. They used flashes and reflections to make the enemy think they were surrounded. The cavalry, dense and heavy, fought like a hammer. The Apache moved like wind. The combination wrecked the unit. Cole and Nally cut a path toward Pike, finding him at the spring that marked the cave's hidden entrance. The man's smile was ugly in the morning light. "Should have known you'd find a way to live," Pike said, hand near his pistol. Cole answered that the fight had become his the moment Pike made it personal. They drew at the same instant. 2 shots rang, and Pike staggered back, a crimson stain spreading across his shirt. He fell into the spring, his blood darkening the clear water. Cole felt the battlefield drain out of him as the adrenaline faded and painful reality crept in. He'd taken a hit, a shoulder through and through, but he was still standing. Around them the fight's wound down. Wilson's command, disoriented and leaderless, faltered. In the aftermath, Cole called a ceasefire and stepped into the open with Nally by his side. He demanded that Wilson accept the truth. Pike was dead, and the claims of gold and weapons were lies meant to draw soldiers into slaughter. He produced Pike's discharge papers, desertion stamped in red. And for once, paper spoke louder than propaganda. Wilson looked at the evidence and ordered his men to withdraw. A truce was hammered out. The soldiers would leave Apache territory. In return, the Cherokee would keep to agreed hunting grounds. It was a fragile peace made from exhaustion and mutual losses. But it was something. Wilson called Cole a traitor to his race as he left, and Cole simply told him what the war had taught him: color matters less than the honor in a man's heart. Wilson did not understand. He rode away. Cole and Nally stayed. Together they built a trading post in neutral ground, far from forts and hunting camps. Sturdy logs, stone foundation, a wide porch that caught the sunrise. It became a place where Apaches could trade without fear and settlers could buy supplies without being eyed as targets. Cole used carpentry skills he'd learned on his father's farm to build counters and shelves. Nally wove rugs and blankets that travelers wanted to buy. The pair enforced a strict no-weapons policy inside the building, and to everyone's surprise, both sides largely respected it. People who had nowhere else came to the post. Outcasts, refugees, survivors, a Mexican blacksmith fleeing bandits, a former slave whose hands knew horses like breath, a Chinese man who'd escaped railroad camps. Nally's knowledge of traditional medicine drew seekers, native and white alike, and she taught Cole her language while he taught her to read English. The trading post grew into a small, stubborn island of cooperation. Chief Goithle watched with quiet approval. He visited when he could, the lines of his face folding into a look that mixed caution and, finally, hope. The post even became the sort of neutral ground where tentative talks between Apache leaders and army officers sometimes took place. talks that stopped fights before they started. On a clear evening, when the sun was low and the desert burned orange, Cole stood on that porch beside Niley and looked at what they had made. Laughter spilled from inside the building. The small community gathered for dinner. Niley slipped her hand into his, and the gesture felt like a sentence finished. "Your brother would be proud," she said softly. Cole let the ghost of his brother relax a fraction. The past wasn't gone, but it had become something that supported him rather than crushed him. "Not just of me," he answered. "Of this, of what we've built." Guithley joined them, placed his hands on both their shoulders, and gave his blessing. Something like acceptance, like a hope for the future. They turned back toward the warm light of the trading post together. Behind them lay blood and battle ahead, an uncertain but self-made future. They had carved a sort of redemption out of a land that asked for everything and promised nothing. It was not an ending. It was the beginning of something written not in orders or laws, but in bread baked, rugs woven, wounds bound, and hands offered in peace.